Welcome back, all to Scary Stories for a Rainy Night, episode 140. Thanks so much for coming tonight. You know the routine. Just 3 quick commercials after stories 1, 2, and 3, and then never more so you can breathe easy, get cozy, or even sleep soundly without interruption. If you'd like to support the channel, please hit that like button, subscribe, and don't be shy. Introduce yourself in the comments below. Join our little community, the Rainy Night Society. Now, let's get started. This initial account brings us back to the time when I was only 14 years old. My friend David, who was 15, and I would frequently have sleepovers, and this evening was no exception. With his parents out of town, we had the house to ourselves. We played video games, listened to music at ear-damaging volumes, and ate way too much junk food, basking in the kind of freedom available to teenagers alone. We had yet to wind down until around 4 a.m. David thought taking a short walk around the neighborhood should burn off some of this excess energy, and I agreed. 10 minutes later, we returned. Now, David's basement was a little weird. His house was situated on a hill. Half of it was above ground, that's where the den was, where we'd usually hang out. The other half was underground, with a TV and couches. That's where we were going to sleep. David put on a movie, gave me a blanket, and we curled up in our respective couches, mine being by the staircase and his on the opposite side of the room. I was asleep with not much time passed. Everything changes during the second half. I woke abruptly to the shakes of David on my shoulder, his face white with terror. He commanded me to be silent and listen. Initially drowsy and still sleepy, I could hardly hear anything, but then it became apparent. Someone was snooping around drawers upstairs. The sound of floorboards creaking followed, and David leaned in and whispered, "I believe someone's up there." I dismissed it at first, perhaps it was just his cats. And then there was the noise that took our breath away. 2 coughs from upstairs. At that instant, our bodies went into fight or flight. Footsteps creaked down to the staircase, leading to the basement. I struggled frantically to locate my phone on the ground. David was quick to switch off the TV, and at the same time, as quietly as we could, we dashed to the door to the den. We passed the staircase without daring to look up. David flung the door open, and we bolted across the street, diving into a neighbor's bushes. From there, David called the police while I kept my eyes locked on his house. In the moonlight, I spotted a tall shadow moving across the living room window. Within minutes, although it had felt like hours, the distant wail of sirens pierced the quiet. 2 police officers pulled up, and we ran straight to the officers, gasping, telling them everything we'd seen and heard. As 2 officers entered the house, another combed the yard while a 4th stayed with us, asking all the usual questions. Did we see the intruder? Did we know what he wanted? Was anything missing? All we knew was that someone was inside. Then suddenly, the yelling began. An officer had seen the man running into the woods at the back of the house. A flashlight caught him, and within seconds, he was handcuffed and under arrest. When they let him out, we could see just how huge he was, quite 6'7" and nearly 300 pounds. The officers cleared the house, verifying no one was in there and nothing had been stolen. I still question what his real motives were to this day. Needless to say, David and I didn't sleep again that night. Every sound made us jump, and we spent the rest of the dark hours pacing the house, terrified he might not have been alone. That was the night someone broke into David's house while I was sleeping over, and it remains the most terrifying experience of my life. The second story happened when I was 18, on what I thought would be just an ordinary walk on a quiet evening. It was around 9 p.m., and the night air was cool and pleasant. I felt safe in my small town, despite being a petite young woman out alone. That sense of safety, however, was a mistake. Since I walked while listening to music, I became thirsty and recalled a tiny corner shop in the block. But when I arrived, the lights were dimmed and the shop was shut. Odd, normally, it remained open until midnight. I shouted, hoping someone within would be able to hear me. After several unsuccessful attempts, I resigned myself and turned to walk home. That is when I noticed the creak of a door coming behind me. The porch light flicked on, and in the doorway stood a man. Relieved that it wasn't one of my attackers, I walked toward him, hoping to buy some water. It was when I got closer that my relief curdled into dread. He was staring at me with wild eyes, and in his hand, glinting under the porch light, was a knife. I froze. My stomach tightened. Sensing my fear, he quickly said something like, "Sorry, I was busy in the kitchen," and disappeared briefly before returning with a bottle of water. The knife never left his hand. Trying to convince myself everything was fine, I handed him the money and hurried away. I cranked my music up so loud that the disturbance would have to compete with it, but this pinching feeling that someone was watching me grew stronger at every step. I turned around. There was nothing. I increased my pace to a jog, desperate to get home. I slowed down to catch my breath when my earphone slipped out, and in the quiet, I heard it, running behind me. I turned around. The same man was standing 10 feet behind me, knife gleaming in his hand. Panic flooded through me. I ran as fast as I ever have run. His footsteps pounded behind me until suddenly, a thud, he had fallen. I didn't hesitate. I didn't glance back. I reached home, and my parents called the police right away. Days later, we learned the horrifying truth. The man wasn't just a store owner. He was part of a human trafficking operation. Police raided his property and found freezers filled with human organs harvested from victims. That night, I escaped with my life. But many others weren't so lucky. The third story comes from a small town in Nevada where wide deserts and rugged mountains create both beauty and danger. For me, life there could be quiet, even boring. So I filled my time with off-roading, long hikes, and walks with my two dogs, Buddy and Snoopy. The open desert behind my house was more than plenty to spend some time in, and a pair of mountains just a couple of miles away were my favorite hiking spots. I nicknamed them Mountain A and Mountain B. Mountain A was easier, with a clear trail, while Mountain B was far steeper and rocky. Normally I chose Mountain A, but on this particular winter day, things went differently. The previous day, a savage storm had snowed the desert under and iced trucks off the road with howling winds. It had improved by morning, and despite not being great, I still wanted to hike. My dad wasn't okay with my going alone, so he and my aunt joined me. This time, it was my aunt who suggested that we take Mountain B since the sun was already warming it up. I hesitated and finally agreed to do it. The desert grounds were muddy and coated with snow, and flakes still drifted from the clearing sky. As we neared the base of the mountain, we noticed something peculiar. There were tire marks in the snow, already a day old. Who would be driving out here in that kind of storm? We exchanged uneasy looks, but brushed it off and kept going. That's when things started to get unsettling. The climb grew more dangerous the higher we went. Sharp rocks jutted out of the frozen ground, slick and hazardous with snow. Each step had to be measured, tentative, or one wrong move would have been disaster. But somehow, we made it to the top. We were cold and exhausted, but exhilarated until we actually looked around. The summit was not what I had envisioned. Instead of pure beauty, the ground was littered with trash, food packaging, beer bottles, and dry, dead bushes. In spite of this, the view was incredible. I snapped photos of the dogs with the town glinting faintly in the distance, trying to enjoy the moment. That's when Buddy and Snoopy became fixated on something near a dead bush. No matter how much I called, they wouldn't move. Irritated, I marched over to pick them up and came to a sudden halt. There were pieces of what looked like burnt cardboard lying around the soil. I thought it was garbage initially, but when I bent down and lifted one of the burnt pieces, I realized it wasn't cardboard after all. It was a fragment of a photograph, an old black and white portrait. On the fragment I held, I could clearly make out an eye, and it looked familiar, too familiar. I got a shiver down my spine. My dad and aunt dismissed it, but I couldn't. There was something about it that didn't sit right with me. As soon as we started driving down the mountain, only a few minutes in, I couldn't take it. I had to go back. My dad and aunt begrudgingly agreed. We gathered up the burnt fragments and tried to assemble them like a jigsaw. It was painstaking, but slowly the image emerged. I recoiled in shock when I matched the last two pieces. It was a photograph of my grandfather, the same one that was in our house. I was shocked. How was this even possible? To my knowledge, that picture was a one-off print. My mind went racing. Had someone broken into our home, grabbed it, and lugged it out here to send us some sort of message? Was my family in danger? Was someone watching us now? We stuffed the pieces into our backpacks and tumbled down the mountain, wind growing stronger and light fading fast. My heart was racing as I tried to call my mom, desperate to know she was safe. But of course, there was no reception in the mountains. By the time we rushed home and got in the door, I was frantic. I found my mom in the kitchen and my BR, but it wasn't my room. I was back in that house, and she was standing at the door, a tall woman, black hair over her face, white dress flowing loose. Her eyes blazed into me, then turned to my parents sleeping beside me. The air grew heavy with anger, hers directed at them. I wanted to yell, but rage poured up inside me instead. I stood, struggling through the immobility, and ran. She stood in the door. I shoved. For one moment, as we touched, the anger vanished. All I felt was endless, crushing loneliness. Then she was gone. I woke in my own bed, daylight streaming through the curtains. I don't usually dream vividly, but this one stayed with me for weeks. It wasn't just a nightmare. It felt like a reminder that whatever lived in that house, whatever followed me all those years, it was still out there. I can't always remember the exact years these things happened. Strange experiences blur together after a while. But this one morning is burned into my memory. It was early late spring, maybe early summer. Sunlight streamed in through my bedroom window, but it had that misty, gray quality, like the day hadn't quite decided to start. I'd just woken up, not startled by a sound, not shaken by a nightmare, just awake. The room was quiet. My bed by the window, the open door framing the hallway, and across from it, my parents' room. Nothing unusual. Everyone was already gone, leaving the house in silence. And then it appeared. Something lurched into the doorway, darker than the shadowed hall behind it, about 5 feet tall. Its body writhed like a tangle of short, twitching tendrils. Confusion froze me for a heartbeat, but dread hit a split second later when I realized this thing wasn't floating. It was walking. Its shape mimicked a man in an old, wide-brimmed hat, but wrong, jagged, like a paper doll cut out by a dull blade, edges sprouting into those razor-sharp tendrils. Was it solid? Smoke? Something else entirely? At first, I told myself it was just a shadow, but then I realized if it was a shadow, something had to be casting it. And when it lurched past my parents' doorway, I saw its feet. This wasn't anyone's shadow. The air pressed heavy against my skull as I tried to comprehend it. Flat, unmistakably flat, like it had been peeled from a wall. Yet there it was, moving freely in 3 dimensions, grinning without a mouth, staring without eyes. I expected it to keep walking toward my sister's room, but then it did something worse. It stopped, turned, slowly. Its head and neck rotated with stiff, unnatural jerks like a broken puppet. The muffled silence grew heavier, and then it faced me. Its head flickered in and out, sometimes vanishing depending on the angle. It was flat, impossibly flat, yet I knew it could see me. I wanted to run, to hide, but my body wouldn't move. My thoughts screamed at my limbs, but nothing happened. Until it stepped closer. The paralysis broke. Desperate, I pulled the covers over my head like a terrified child, praying the blanket would shield me from whatever horror waited just beyond. I pictured its claws sinking into me, its smoky body burning me alive, but nothing happened. Time dragged on, each second an eternity. Was it standing there, inches from my face, waiting for me to look? Finally, I lowered the blanket. The room looked normal again. Birds chirped outside. The dread lingered, but the shadow was gone. I crept through the house, checking every corner, every room. My sister's door was closed, but that hardly felt like comfort. The thing was gone, but I never forgot it. Even years later, I couldn't sleep with the bedroom door open. And what I saw, I don't even know that I did. God only knows that I never want to see it again. Flash forward to 2017. My husband is working on the road a great deal. I'm used to spending long stretches of time alone in our first-floor apartment. But that winter, just weeks before Christmas, I felt something looming over me. It wasn't loneliness. It was dread. Nightmares came first. I've battled sleep paralysis since I was a teenager, but one episode stuck with me. I woke to find a girl standing at the foot of my bed, 10 years old at most. Pale white nightgown, hollow black eyes, a teddy bear dangling from her hand. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I fought to wake up, and eventually, I did. But the image clung to me for days. Around the same time, another strange presence appeared, a black cat. Every night, without fail. It followed me and my elderly dog during our late walks. Never during the day. Always at night. Always watching from the shadows. I don't think black cats are bad luck, but this one was different. wrong. I couldn't shake the thought that if it ever got close enough, it would take my dog's life. It sounds insane, I know, but the feeling was overwhelming. Then came the night that nearly broke me. At 2:45 a.m., I jolted awake to the sound of my doorbell. My heart slammed in my chest. Who would ring a bell at that hour? I hardly knew my neighbors, and no one had reason to show up unannounced, much less in the dead of night. I crept to the door, peered through the peephole. Nothing. Checked the front window. Nothing. Silence. I told myself I'd dreamed it, or maybe the wiring had shorted. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. I forced myself back into bed, trying to believe everything was fine. But over the following days, teddy bears began appearing in strange ways. My niece asked for one for Christmas. I saw ads for them everywhere. Little reminders, like echoes of that girl with the hollow eyes and the dangling bear. And way down inside, I knew this wasn't over. My niece would make much fuss for dolls or plastic animals, dinosaurs, snakes, that kind of thing. But all of a sudden, she wanted to have just a teddy bear. Strange, because she already had several. Not long after, I began noticing teddy bears everywhere. One morning, on my way to work, I drove past a pile of clothing scattered across the freeway. As I weaved through it, one item caught my eye. A teddy bear, filthy, crushed flat from countless cars, its fur matted with dirt, one eye missing. Once, at a gas station, I headed into the bathroom to wash my hands and discovered a teddy bear sticker taped over the bathroom mirror. Harmless, perhaps, but disturbing. At first, I reminded myself, frequency bias, you focus on something, and suddenly, everywhere you look, there it is. But then the night that changed, everything happened. It was just after 3 a.m. when I woke to the sound of my doorbell. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed, straining to listen. Silence. Nothing. Still, I crept to the window, then the peephole. Empty porch. I should have gone back to bed. Instead, I opened the door, and there it was. There was a teddy bear sitting in front of my wall, right next to my front door. Huge, practically waist high. Old. Shabby. A red bow around its neck. Glassy eyes staring straight ahead, but like they were, staring right through me. All of the breath went out of me in that one moment. I looked out at the street, the sidewalk, the gate. No one. Just me and that bear. I slammed the door closed, locked it up tight. Call the police? And say what, that I was being threatened by a stuffed animal? It sounded insane. Still shaking, I phoned my husband, who was hundreds of miles away. He swore he had nothing to do with it. Nobody I knew would. So I stayed awake all night, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, I dreaded opening the door again. But I had to leave for work. The bear was still present. During the daylight, it appeared even more awful, fur covered in grime, and blades of grass, stuffing hanging out of ripped seams, faint reddish discolorations all over its body. No card, no letter, no explanation. It should have been there. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, so I left it. My coworkers later convinced me it was probably a prank by neighborhood kids. That afternoon, with the sun shining and my nerves somewhat steady, I put on gloves and hauled it to the dumpster. I never saw it again. But the story doesn't end there. On December 23rd, Christmas Eve, I shopped at the grocery store at the last minute. Classic me. I thought I could fill all of my purchases without a cart, paper towels, food bags, arms full. At the parking lot, I struggled with opening my hatchback as a man came over. He looked rough, dirty work clothes, messy hair, worn boots. But what struck me most were his eyes. Clear blue, uncomfortably sharp, like he was peering straight into me. He offered to help. I refused. But he insisted, reaching over and opening the hatch before I could stop him. The lot wasn't empty, so I didn't feel in immediate danger, but I was uneasy. I thanked him, loaded my things, and tried to end the encounter. "Merry Christmas," I said, forcing a smile. He smiled back. "Merry Christmas to you too." Then he held out his hand, and in it was a tiny Christmas teddy bear, complete with a Santa hat. I froze. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to take it, but I didn't know what to say. Was this just coincidence? Or was he the one who left that giant bear on my porch? Had he been following me this whole time? My thoughts raced, but all I managed was, "Oh, no thanks. I don't have kids." I got into my car and drove off, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. He stood there, still watching me, his expression shifting to something darker, angry. I got home fast, faster than ever. For weeks afterward, I was on edge, paranoia gnawing at me. The teddy bears stopped appearing, but the fear lingered. And to this day, whenever I see one, whether I see it in a store or draped over someone else's arm or abandoned on the side of a road, I don't see a child's toy. I see a reminder, a warning. A teddy bear will never look innocent to me again.